Hello and welcome to the Oregonian Sports Podcast. I am Bill Oram, joined as always by Brenna Greene, and there really is no lengthy preamble required this week. There's only one place to start this podcast. Often there are many things for us to dive into here on this show, but there's really one story this week, Brenna, and it is the passing of Trailblazers legend Bill Walton at the age of 71. Brenna, I'm just going to ask, you and I both are too young to have seen Bill play. We grew up here. We grew up kind of understanding his legacy, I think. But for you personally, how did you experience Bill Walton, and how did you come to find him as you were growing up?
Yeah, I mean, I experienced him as a broadcaster. Most people my age, that is our absolute primary experience with him. There are some people who did not enjoy Bill as a broadcaster. I was always team I loved him. And I loved him because no matter what, when I left a Bill Walton broadcast, two things. One, I knew I was going to laugh at some point. And two, I was going to learn something. Now, it most likely had nothing to do with the game of basketball. But I loved that about him. And I love people that are just so truly authentic to themselves. And that is Bill Walton, for sure. So I would imagine that you might have a little bit more like personal stories with him, considering your time in LA.
Somewhat, yeah. So I covered Luke Walton with the Lakers when he got his first head coaching job in 2016, and my relationship with Bill at that time generally consisted of me trying to get him to talk to me. I'm like the first person in recorded history that Bill Walton wouldn't talk to, because I always wanted to talk to him about Luke and Luke coaching the Lakers, and Bill never wanted to make it about him. Bill didn't want Luke's experience and Luke's job to be about him. And so if Bill talks, like obviously there would be great stories and but Bill kind of takes over. And I think he had the self-awareness to sort of say, this is not about me, this is about Luke. And so he was always just incredibly kind and even entertaining in like the interactions we had, but he would always just say something to the effect of, I'm just a dad, and he would want to leave it at that. And I thought that was always so gracious of him, because our perception of Bill is that there was never a microphone he wouldn't want to talk into, that he would absolutely he was the most gregarious, garrulous person maybe in history. And he did have he really, I don't know, like I had the pleasure and privilege of seeing him really lean into being a dad and a grandfather, again from a distance, right? I mean, I wasn't in those intimate moments, but just seeing him come to games to watch Luke, to celebrate Luke, was always really cool. But it was fun for me to have that connection to him and to see him, just because I grew up in a huge Blazers family, as I know you did. And the legacy of Bill Walton was just so celebrated in my family. And I didn't, it wasn't about all the, the other stuff. It wasn't about, the politics or the counterculture. It was sort of the idea that this incredibly astute hippie had this brief magical tenure in Portland and took the Trailblazers to the mountaintop. And I have family members who were teachers. My aunt is a teacher, and she always decorated her classroom in Blazers posters. And I ended up inheriting a lot of those posters as she would replace them. And so I had on my bedroom wall all these posters from the 1975 team picture, or the team of the 70s sort of collage. And I just had so many of those little keepsakes. And being a teacher, she had those laminated, and so they were in pristine condition on my wall. And like I just Bill Walton was as I'm sure he was to any Blazers fan who was not alive or old enough to see the 1977 team play. He was just a legend, like almost a mythical figure. And then, he would, every week come on our TV, or, if I was lucky enough to be at a Blazers game that he was calling for NBC, you'd see him down there, still had red hair, I think, in the mid to late 90s. So it was always really cool. I thought that this guy who was kind of this goofball on television was like a true hero in Portland. And like, I always felt this connection to him because of that I'm sure every Portlander or fan felt, regardless of how you, felt about his politics in the 70s, or like who he was associated with, or, what he quote unquote represented. But like, I mean, he did something for the city of Portland that nobody else has been able to do. And I mean, and that entire 1977 team, of course, but like, that doesn't happen without, the big guy in the middle. So, I think that sort of conceptually, I worshipped Bill Walton because, like, what a legend. And then to have the opportunity to enjoy him personally and listen, like almost everybody has a Bill Walton story, like especially in media, but basketball fans, I mean, the amount of outpouring and personal anecdotes that people have shared just these last couple of days has been just spectacular to watch and to listen to and to read. So I mean, mine are probably among the worst you're going to hear, but to be able to enjoy him personally in the ways that I did was just a pleasure. I mean, just a fascinating person. And like you said, you're going to learn something probably not related to basketball. And, he was such an enthusiast, like not a basketball enthusiast or a music enthusiast. He was an enthusiast of all the things for life. And, I wrote this in the column that I wrote on Monday, but I do feel, that, he might have come as close as anyone ever has to figuring out the meaning of life or unlocking the secrets of life. And, I think we can all learn from that, and the way he lived, and the fact that he chose to live with joy and with gratitude, despite having a very, very difficult life, and, the health problems and injuries and, surgeries that, nearly killed him, to come back from that and just be so grateful and awestruck by like the wonders of the world. I mean, obviously we could all learn from that.
Yeah, I look back now and I realize that my thought process was more spot on than I even thought at the time. But when I did not see him show up for the Pac-12 basketball tournament, I was like, this is weird. Like something is off. Like Bill Walton would there's no way Bill Walton would miss this. Like,
right.
How is Bill Walton not on the Pac-12 championship game? Like that is literally his mark. In this generation anyways. And I just was kind of like struck by that at the time. And now obviously we know that there were other things going on that nobody had any idea about. But yeah, I mean, I find it, so many people yesterday tweeted that Bill Walton basically didn't know a day without the Pac-12 conference, and maybe that is the most perfect thing. I just wish that he would have been able to get that opportunity to, be a part of the Pac-12 tournament and have that. But, at the very least, at least his beloved Conference of Champions, he basically didn't know a day without it. So it's really hard, and it makes me like kind of reassess I have like so many regrets of like, the times that I was in the same place as him, not going up and
Mm-hmm.
introducing myself. And maybe that's just a good reminder for those of us who are able to be in the same places as these sort of people. Yesterday I was like, man, what have I tweeted about Bill Walton over the years? So I literally just searched my username and Bill Walton on Twitter, and it popped up, and I was like, oh, I think I was at his first game in Gonzaga ever, because I just don't think that he was. I have no recollection of him calling a Gonzaga game before that game in 2018, and there's no way he came in like the mid 2000s or something like that, because I believe he was still working for NBC then, and I would have had some sort of recollection from 2010 on if he would have called a game there. So I think 2018 was the first time he ever called a game. That was my thought process back in that day. And I had this video that I tweeted of him just like staring up at the screen, watching Gonzaga's hype video. And that obviously triggered that memory of just standing there. And, this is something that, maybe only I can identify with. But standing there watching Bill Walton watch a team from my alma mater in awe was just so special. And I believe, oh yes, now it's all coming back together. That was the game that Rui Hachimura was playing for Gonzaga at the time, and he hit a game winner over UW. And I remember after that game now, just Bill Walton just, and it was hilarious. It's like you're watching Rui Hachimura, who like barely knew English a few years ago, just get heaped with praise by Bill Walton. And I can only imagine what is going on in Rui Hachimura's mind of like, what is happening here? I mean, he probably didn't know who Bill Walton was. And they did a post-game interview with him. I remember watching that. And just how special that was to just kind of take in and be an observer. And I remember Bill just being so enthralled with Rui at the time. So yeah, it's just one of those things where, now I look back and I'm like, I wish I would have said something to him then. I guess you just kind of assume, you're like, oh, the time will come at some point. The time will come at some point where I'll be able to, say thank you for what you've done for my hometown.
Sure.
And that time didn't come for me. So it's a good reminder to take advantage of the moments in which you are in the same place as other people, because you never know if that's going to happen again. So that's just something I kind of took away from yesterday. But man, just, I don't know. He was a special person, a special broadcaster, and he loved it right up until the end. And he loved like you said, the game of basketball betrayed him in a way, and he never betrayed the game.
Yeah, that's well said.
And
go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead.
Oh yeah, no. The game of basketball betrayed him. He never betrayed the game. And I just have so much respect for how he handled himself in his life. And I mean, he was still calling games in February. That is crazy to think about now with everything that was going on. That is how much he loved basketball.
You alluded to this, but no one was more broken up and angry about the death of the Pac-12 conference. He made that very clear. And, no one celebrated the Pac-12, Pac-10, Pac-8 more than Bill Walton. Many anecdotes about Bill that have come out in the last 48 hours. A lot of great remembrances. My personal favorite, Brenna, was in The Athletic by my friend Chris Kamrani, who has written beautifully about Bill in the past and had actually been working on a story about Bill going into that Pac-12 tournament that you talked about, and was going to kind of shadow Bill for the final Pac-12 tournament. And then, Bill as we know, was unable to attend. So he had all this like great reporting that was going to go in that story that ended up becoming, very, very fitting now, and kind of in an obituary piece in the Athletic. But the one anecdote that jumped out to me that I just have to share is from the PK 85 tournament 2 years ago in Portland, when Michigan State was playing at the Moda Center, and Tom Izzo sees Bill Walton across the gym, sitting in the stands. And this is as it's relayed by Roxy Bernstein, who called many games with Bill on the Pac-12 network. This is Roxy. Izzo is screaming, "Bill, Conference of Champions, we're fraternity brothers now." And then from the piece, meaning, of course, that UCLA was joining the Big Ten, and so on. So from the piece, Walton dropped his head into those massive old paws of his and groaned and grumbled. Izzo walked over and offered a fist bump to Walton and said he couldn't wait to get Walton out to East Lansing for a game. "Coach," Walton deadpanned, "I don't do truck stops." He didn't raise his fist to meet Izzo's either. I love that. It's so good. It's so well timed. It is so Bill. I think it encapsulates his spirit, his humor, and also his love for the Pac-12, and how dang unwelcoming he was of the Big Ten move. But Bill was so many things to so many people, and I think, really almost every image of him conveys joy in some way, especially, in his later years. But, you love the pictures of him in the crowd at Grateful Dead shows, towering over everyone else, just his arms extended, soaking it in. The goofy things he would do on the sidelines, on broadcasts, eating a cupcake with a lit candle still, the ridiculous lines.
An Apex Mountain moment.
Oh, absolutely.
Apex Mountain.
And never took himself too seriously, of course. And this is somebody who had a complicated life, who was a product of the 60s and the the counterculture movement, arrested for protesting the Vietnam War, played for John Wooden and the Pyramid of Success, arguably, maybe not even arguably, the greatest college basketball player ever. 22 of 23 in a national championship game is just outrageous. He, I think what our generation, has a harder time appreciating, I think, and I think this is true of me as well, was just what a sensational player he is said to have been. And you can find the clips on YouTube, occasionally, I'll see the, game 6 of the 1977 championship game will be on, NBA TV, or, it lives online. He was just a masterful player, obviously tremendous passer, probably the greatest passing big man of his era, a wonderful defender, everything, made everything move. And it's just so unfortunate that things ended as poorly for him in Portland as they did. Obviously, the injuries, and then the anger that he had toward the organization and the medical staff over, their treatment of him in the 1978 playoffs. I mean, he wins the MVP in 1978. It's well known that the Blazers were 50-10 at that point. They were gunning for 72-10 to set the record. And they may have well done it. They were on their way. And then you take Bill Walton out of the mix. I think they finished like 8-14. Does that math track? It's something like that. I mean, they just, Bill was the reason that Blazer Mania came to exist. I don't know if the Blazers survive in Portland in the 70s without Bill Walton. He just
perfect person for the perfect town.
And what I thought exactly, and I thought Ian Carmel said it really well on Twitter, X. Do I need to call it? I'm not calling it X. Bill Walton wouldn't call it X.
I
Bill
refuse.
Walton would call it Twitter. Said it really well on Twitter the other day, on Sunday. He said something to the effect of, I don't know if he was the best trailblazer or the greatest trailblazer, but he was the trailblazeriest trailblazer. And I think that's true. And kind of to your point, like the right person in the right place, reflective of the city, the weirdness of the city, and an eccentric guy to sort of like help elevate it and lift the city as it was growing. So, a sad day just because a sad week, just because of what Bill meant to Portland, what Bill meant to the world, but also because of, how much, you felt that he still had to give. But tremendous respect for, as you said, working as long as he did, and also in celebrating the game of basketball as long as he possibly could. And then just the intense privacy with which, he and those close to him, his family, kept this between them. I mean, nobody knew this was coming. I mean, if you were reading the tea leaves, okay, so he misses the Pac-12 tournament, he misses the last month of games, something's wrong. But, I think, for the most part, the kind of messaging that, I mean, in as much as there was messaging, but, like from ESPN and things like that, was he's fighting an illness, but, he's going to be fine. And to now know that, that was people looking out for him and respecting his privacy, is pretty powerful.
Yeah. And I think also, you see that and you just think, oh, it's one of his other ailments. You never would think to yourself, oh, it's a different thing, because he had so many different things going on with his body, and, showing up to games and seeing how he would even sit at the announcer's table with 3 chairs stacked on top of each other, because that was the only way that he would be comfortable, which is like, I never understood how that was comfy, but it worked for him, which, maybe that's the perfect way to describe Bill Walton. I never understood, his whole, you could never truly understand his whole MO, but it worked for him, and it worked so beautifully. So of course he would stack 3 chairs on top of each other, and that's the way he was comfortable. So many other people would have had like a specialty chair or something like that. No. He needs his 3 to 4 chairs stacked onto each other, then he's good. Yeah, he is just, he's one of one. He's one of one, and that is why he has made such an impact over the last few days. And I cannot get enough Bill Walton content. I will stop and watch almost anything right now.
If you ran the Portland Trailblazers, the local basketball team, how would you, or what would you do if you would, I mean, how would you honor Bill Walton going forward? I saw that Ron Wyden, the United States Senator, said that he would like to see a statue. I have previously called for a statue of Bill Schonely and along the, down the line of Bill and Clyde and eventually Dame. Portland hasn't done statues to honor their basketball greats. What would you do? Do you think that if there was to be a Blazer statue, would you go for Bill, or am I being a prisoner of the moment? What would you do now if you're sitting in those meetings at Blazers HQ?
I mean, I think a Bill and Bill statue would be great, considering they are so incredibly linked to the.
Leave me out of it.
Yeah. I think Bill Schonely and Bill Walton, some sort of statue together would be incredibly fitting, considering they both passed away in the same year, and they both are so incredibly linked to the start of this Blazers franchise. It stinks because those city uniforms, those are almost a year in planning whenever you're doing something like that. I would love to see some sort of uniform devoted to the two of them, and their legacy. I don't know if that there's no way that's probably coming in this next year, but maybe the year after they could do something. I think that would be really special to see that one of those city edition uniforms dedicated to them. Just to have something that would be a little bit different. And I'm not sure what that really looks like. Because, you think Bill Walton, you think some sort of tie-dye, right? That's not really Bill Schonely. But they could figure it out. Or maybe you just do one to Bill Walton. Maybe you just do some sort of like tie-dye-esque pattern. All I know is I'd probably buy that thing. So yeah, those are the things that kind of stand out to me as something maybe that they could do down the line to really honor those two, two franchise legends passing in the same year.
I would do. I would love to see a Bill Walton inspired City Edition jersey, but as you said, those are at least a year in the planning, and but I think tie dye, some nod to the Grateful Dead, but I just don't see how, especially if you are going to do a big renovation and reimagination of the Rose Quarter, how that does not include a plaza, us with statues honoring your greats, because it's been said by others, and I think it's true, that I think the Blazers have probably retired too many jerseys, where they have elevated too many people into the pantheon of Blazers legends. And listen, they're all legends in their own right, but there is an extra tier for the Bill Walton, Clyde Drexler, Damian Lillard, and Bill Schonely as a great ambassador for this franchise. And so, to me, I think having a statue of Bill Walton, depicting the moment of celebration and jubilation after, after they win the championship, when his jersey's off, that moment, or of him like at the parade, somehow capturing sort of the reaching of the mountaintop in Portland, the only time it's ever happened. And the Shawns, I mean, I think the Lakers have a statue of Chick Hearn outside of what used to be called Staples Center, where he is, behind the broadcasting table calling a game, and it's a great landmark around that building, and fans come and sit at the broadcasting table next to Chick, and it's I think something where you are bringing fans, where they have a chance to interact and share share that with the legends of the franchise, just seems like a no-brainer. So I would do it. I'd go statues for Walton and Schonely for sure. And then, I mean, beyond that, I mean, come the start of next year, obviously they'll play with some sort of tribute to Bill in the form of a jersey patch, you would assume. But it's an immeasurable loss for basketball and the world. And because Bill was so big, he was such a big figure, he filled all of it, right? He filled like the entire world with his bigness. But like in Portland, it's a different, more intimate relationship because of, where he was in his life when he was here, what he achieved when he was here. And, he should be celebrated, even more intimately here. And so, and the relationship wasn't always strong. I mean, there were decades where he was, a little MIA, and it was a strained relationship. So, I think that everyone should be grateful that, these last couple of decades, he was a pretty visible presence. You'd see him around, and he was honored many times by the franchise, and I think they should keep that going.
One of the other favorite things that I saw yesterday was Tristan I'm sorry, Tristan, I'm gonna screw up your last name. Tristan Brelanto Lewis, who's one of the Blazers videographers, saying that he sat down with Bill to shoot their code of conduct for fans, and it was supposed to be a minute long, or maybe that's just I think I'm associating that clip with another one. Anyways, he was supposed to sit down and do this code of conduct. Bill said, "Screw this script. We completely ad-lib off the script, and you obviously can't use that. You need your code of conduct for fans to be that script." He's like, yeah, he went completely off script, just went for it, and that was that. And he got up, and I was like, well, can't use that. And it was just that's just so perfectly Bill. Like,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you have this thing you want me to say? I'm not going to say that, but I'm going to say something as probably even more impactful. I would love to see the full. I'm sure it probably doesn't exist anymore, but I would love to see the full clip of him just doing his own code of conduct for fans. I want to see what Bill Walton's code of conduct for Blazers fans is.
One thing you can say about Bill Walton, his life of 71 years, is that he did not stick to the script.
Nope.
So, all right. So this week, take some time to honor Bill Walton in whatever way feels right to you. Listen to the Grateful Dead, and watch some basketball. Celebrate the game of basketball, and remember a legend. Okay, Brenna. Before we get out of here, and like I said, there was really one thing to discuss this week, and it is the passing of the big redhead. But there are other topics that I think we should get to. And at the top of that list, we talked a little bit about college baseball last week. We talked about Oregon State and Oregon kind of flaming out in the Pac-12 tournament, the final Pac-12 tournament, the final championship awarded by the Pac-12. The conference has now essentially gone dark. Oregon State ends up with the 15 seed in the field, hosting a regional this weekend. Unlikely to host. We'll need Kentucky to lose its own regional to host a super. Kentucky's pretty good. I believe Kentucky's the 3 seed, so they're going to need some help to host a super regional. The Beavers spent most of the year like 6, 8, 9. This is a top 10 team most of the year that was in position to have one of those top 8 seeds if they kind of took care of business. They did not. What are your thoughts on Oregon State as a 15 seed, and how do you sort of look at kind of the road they have ahead of them?
Honestly, my thoughts when I saw that seed come out had nothing to do with this year and everything to do with years in the future. The fact that they dropped all the way to a 15 seed right now makes me look at that independent schedule that is coming next year and think to myself, man, this might be the last regional that is at that stadium for quite some time. It is going to be a big uphill battle for them. If they dropped all the way to 15 with how they ended the season, and by the way, they were only one inning away from winning the Pac-12. That is not a good message. That is not a message received well if you're a part of Oregon State baseball in terms of how things look in the future. And I mean, I even look at it from, once again, I'm going to look at things through the perspective of Gonzaga. I covered their program for 4 years, and like they also were in a position to host a regional a few years back, and they stumbled at the very end, and they did not get their regional, and they had to go down to Oregon and play at Oregon. So, I look at that. They're in the WCC. I can't imagine that Oregon State's schedule at the end of the day is going to be, it's not going to be as competitive as what it was, what it has been being in the Pac-12. And, I just see the track record of the smaller guys in the sport from years past, and I just think to myself, if you're going to this regional, you should probably savor it, because we do not know the next time Oregon State is going to be hosting. It don't look so good.
So the thing, to your point, like I was thinking about it today, because we talked a lot about, can baseball keep this group together? Like, will guys leave?
Yes.
And the thing that I think is just as important is, will you be able to recruit the caliber of player into your program as what you have done, historically over the last 25 years? Because, keeping Gavin Turley is great, but Gavin Turley has only, got another year, and then he's off to the big leagues as well. So I do think this is a really important postseason in terms of continuing to spread the gospel of Oregon State baseball. Like, if you go somewhat quietly this spring, that is really suboptimal going into next year. The one thing I will say is, like, college baseball is a sport that has managed to reward the little guy a lot more than the rest of college athletics, and it's pretty, like, I mean, you look at, schools from the Big West that have had success, Cal State Fullerton, historically, UC Irvine playing in Oregon State's regional this weekend.
It's a really strong baseball conference, though.
It is, and Fresno State won a College World Series. I mean, the point is, like, you don't have to be in a power conference to have success in college baseball, to be a baseball school. Dallas Baptist, Oral Roberts, like, these are small schools that have found success. But Oregon State has operated consistently at a higher level than those kinds of schools, and so, I think Oregon State has. I don't know. I think the Beavers. I think if I really had to bet, I think the Beavers are going to continue to operate at a really high level baseball-wise. I think that they will continue to find guys who make sense for their program. I don't anticipate. I think there will be players who leave. I think that there will be players who leave this year from baseball. I think that the history of everything else we've seen at Oregon State, you'd be foolish not to believe that. But I still think that baseball is going to be in a better position to weather the storm. I think that, Mitch Canham is uniquely positioned to maintain the level of this program. I think the next couple of years could be rocky, though. And, like, that independent schedule, like, we haven't seen it. Where is it? What is it? What is it going to look like? What are those players hearing about where they're going to be playing next year? I think that's really important. As it relates to this weekend, you would expect the Beavers to win the regional. The biggest threat is UC Irvine, which was kind of in position where it could have potentially hosted a regional itself. So the Oregon State, if everything goes chalk, Oregon State and UC Irvine should be squaring off Saturday night at Goss. That's a really big game. That has the potential to be a really, really big game for the Beavs. And, on a weekend that, is almost certainly, not entirely certainly, but quite likely Travis Bazana's final, weekend at Goss. There's going to be a good crowd. It's going to be a big event. So I'm excited for the Beavers. I mean, I feel the weight of realignment as much as anybody, but again, like, there are so many things that happen in college baseball. You look at Oregon last year getting within 3 outs of winning a super regional and going to the College World Series. It's just kind of incredible that, Oregon had no business being in the field, and then they end up winning the Pac-12 tournament as, you recall, 5th seed, 6th seed. They were not in position where they should have won the Pac-12 tournament. They do. They go win a regional that, again, probably had no business winning, and they nearly make it to the College World Series. So college baseball is a weird sport, but you would expect the Beavers to take care of business at Goss. This has been a dominant team at home, absolutely dominant.
Yeah, I really hope for Oregon State's fans that it just doesn't end the way last year ended, which was kind of just like in a whimper. Like, last year's season kind of felt like that a little bit. So I really hope that they're able to just have more of a moment of celebration, especially this week with all the unknown that is coming their way.
I would also ask you about the Ducks. I was trying to pull up that region that they're in, because they're in Santa Barbara, with a bunch of California schools, right? Sorry, I was trying to pull it up here. I know they have. Is Fresno in that? Sorry, I was.
Oh no, I don't.
Yeah, Fresno State, Santa Barbara, and Oregon plays San Diego. Yeah, so it's a bunch of WCC schools, or excuse me,
only one WCC school.
San Diego's in the WCC, Santa Barbara's in the Big West, and Fresno's in the Mountain West.
Mountain West.
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't know. That doesn't seem I mean, Santa Barbara's supposedly good, but I mean, it doesn't seem inconceivable to me that Oregon, which, Oregon won 37 games again this year. I mean, they were not a slouch of a team.
No.
Again, kind of whimpered out in the Pac-12 tournament. But I mean, it's not inconceivable to me that Oregon could do what they did last year, which is go down and win a regional on the road. So another one to watch.
We shall see how it all works out. I do remember how much fun that super regional in Eugene was last year. Boy, was that a good time. So hopefully we can have similar vibes at Goss this year.
Yeah, they're gonna need some help. Okay, Brenna. I think we're gonna let the teams play, and we'll come back next week and recap it all and see what else is going on. But certainly appreciate you sharing your thoughts on Big Bill. As we said at the top and kind of throughout, really there may not be a bigger Oregon sports figure, and we could certainly debate those. Well, I'll leave that to someone else, but in terms of his impact on the state, his impact on kind of the cultivation of the sports culture here, totally, in my opinion, without peer. So an immense loss. All right, Brenna.
Absolutely.
We'll talk next week. Thanks to all of you who are listening. Please continue to follow our coverage on Oregon Live. Watch Brenna on KOIN 6 in Portland, Oregon. And we'll be back next week on another episode of the Oregonian Sports Podcast. Thank you so very much for listening.